Welcome to the Bitcoin Profits Podcast, guys. We are going to be going over my CBDC versus Bitcoin Substack today. I'm going to run through basically like a lecture style. I'll try and keep you guys entertained. But this is probably going to be some of the best stuff that we've got. And we've got some good current events that could be a pretty big catalyst for Bitcoin. You guys ready to go?
I agree.
Let's jump in. So you ever heard of Blackrock?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Investing
Yeah.
company, right?
It's like they're like an asset manager.
Okay.
So, but they're like the big swinging dick of asset managers.
they're like accountants.
So they handle $10 trillion worth of assets, like on their balance sheet.
What kind of assets? Like real estate?
All sorts of assets. And then they have, I think, so they filed for something like 570 ETFs in the history of Blackrock. And they've gotten every single ETF except for one.
Which is?
I'm not sure the ETF that they didn't pass. But what is significant is BlackRock filed for a Bitcoin ETF.
What does that mean? What's a Bitcoin ETF?
So a Bitcoin ETF is traded on the New York Stock Exchange, and it's backed 1-to-1 with Bitcoin. So basically, everybody can buy Bitcoin on the stock exchange.
Okay.
Well, we can't do that right now?
No,
Where would we buy our Bitcoin?
you have to buy your Bitcoin like through cryptocurrency, like through a centralized exchange.
Okay.
So this allows anybody to purchase Bitcoin through any sort of stock exchange platform that everybody has.
That's when it turns into an ETF. It goes
Right.
on the New York side.
Right. But also, BlackRock has $10 trillion worth of assets. So it's I got an interesting like model that James from Invest Answers, shout out because he's amazing, but he put together a model of just a percentage of BlackRock's total asset value. A percentage of that, so he put together different percentage that BlackRock could allocate to the Bitcoin ETF. And if they allocate just 0.5% of their assets, which is $50 billion, and it's kind of like, okay, so then there's like the multiplier effect. So if $50 billion were to purchase Bitcoin, Bitcoin's market cap's not going to go up by 50 billion because the price is made by supply and demand.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that demand coming at one time would be a pretty big jump to Bitcoin's price, and it wouldn't be equal to a 1-to-1 value. So if $50 billion was to try and buy Bitcoin, Bitcoin's market cap would go up a multiple of 21 times 50 billion.
Really?
Yes.
Because it's 21 million Bitcoin.
That's not exactly, I'm not exactly sure how he calculated the multiplier, but this is his model that he built. So he's saying the impact that $50 billion would have on purchasing Bitcoin would be 1.05 trillion dollars difference in market cap, and Bitcoin's market cap is 550 billion today.
It's like a quick synopsis on what trillion and billion, the difference. 1 billion seconds ago was 31 years ago. 1 trillion years ago, 1 trillion seconds ago was around 300 BC.
Like that?
Yeah.
I like that. Because, yeah, that is, trillions and billions is hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
because like a trillion is just so much more than a billion, and we don't really think in exponential terms. Is actually something that I'll get to later.
Literally, because it goes from millions to billions to trillions. There's nothing in between.
So overall, the picture is BlackRock manages $10 trillion of assets, and if they allocate 0.5%, which seems like a very small portion of their portfolio, if they allocate 0.5% of their $10 trillion in assets to Bitcoin, then the Bitcoin's price would immediately be worth $102,000.
I feel like BlackRock is just that one devious company that's just gonna shoot Bitcoin up. Oh my god.
Devious, maybe,
And they know what they're doing.
but yeah, if they want to do something, they're gonna do it big because they're BlackRock. So now, if they allocate 1% of their portfolio to Bitcoin, Bitcoin's price is $177,000.
One Bitcoin would be costing that much?
$177,000.
Wow.
If BlackRock decides to allocate 1% of its portfolio,
How likely are they to do that?
it's hard to tell. But it's like if they're starting a spot Bitcoin ETF, then they obviously want to buy Bitcoin. And they obviously want to give people an on-ramp on the New York Stock Exchange to buy Bitcoin. Now, if they allocate 5% of their portfolio, $500 billion, then Bitcoin's price theoretically will be worth $777,000.
If they put how much?
Just 5% of their portfolio.
So how much did you say it would go up to?
$777,000.
Wow.
Which is like, we're getting into crazy numbers.
Why wouldn't they want to do that if they just put in, because their money, that price of Bitcoin that they have, that Bitcoin that they have would shoot up too, and that would just like what 21x their
Yeah.
profits.
Yeah. Seems pretty easy.
Yeah.
But we'll see. We'll see what happens. So it's also that BlackRock's like the big swinging dick.
Yeah.
So like the Fidelities, the Vanguards, they're following close behind. Like Fidelity filed for a Bitcoin ETF today too.
I was gonna say, I feel like if BlackRock did invest some of their money into Bitcoin, all these other companies would do the same thing, and they would just trust them because they're the big swinging
True.
dick.
True.
They're like, if
Why?
they're gonna do it, we're gonna do it too.
It gives a lot of credibility
Yeah.
to Bitcoin as an investment if BlackRock wants to invest money into Bitcoin.
Why does BlackRock and Fidelity have to file separate ETFs?
Because they're separate institutions.
So they have to do separate ETFs?
Yeah, they want their own. They want to make money from their ETF. And it's kind of like a first mover's advantage.
Yeah.
What
So-
exactly does that mean to turn, like, that they want their own ETF, but like Bitcoin should be universal for anybody?
Right, but they are managing the ETF. So they basically, people buy their ETF, and then BlackRock's using Coinbase custodial services. So Coinbase is going to hold the Bitcoin, and then people are going to buy the ETF on the stock exchange.
Can we do a quick breakdown of what an ETF is?
An ETF is normally like a group of a bunch of stocks. So if you had like, it'd be like a tech ETF. So they would get a bunch of tech companies,
Got it.
put it in this pool where they have like Apple
S&Ps.
allocation, Nvidia, Tesla, and then they would have like a pool of sometimes like hundreds of stocks, and people can just buy the ETF where they're basically buying a portion of all of the
Got it.
sector.
Okay.
So
Like
if
the
they're
technology sector.
if they're trying to do a Bitcoin ETF, are they going to mix it with anything else like Ethereum?
No, because
Solana?
this is going to be a Bitcoin spot ETF. So it's 100% Bitcoin backed by Bitcoin.
So why do they need to call it ETF if it's not like a group of other exchanges or stocks?
Well,
Why can't they just do Bitcoin?
Because you're not actually buying Bitcoin. You're buying the fund that buys Bitcoin.
Oh, okay. So Fidelity or BlackRock.
Yeah.
So can BlackRock and Fidelity do their separate ones?
Yes.
Or is it whoever gets it first?
Well, whoever gets it first will be like a first mover advantage. So they'll probably have a majority market share, at least in the beginning and maybe long term. So when BlackRock files with ETF, everybody's like, whoa. Like, okay, if they're doing it, first of all, they're probably going to get approved because if BlackRock wants something, they get it. And then second of all, everybody's like, okay, well, we can't be far behind because we can't let them have the entire market. And they're getting like that first mover advantage.
So let's say BlackRock and Fidelity both get it regulated, right? They both get the Bitcoin ETFs. So would I have to go to Fidelity's website if I just want Fidelity's ETF versus for Bitcoin versus BlackRock's? Or
I'd imagine you'd be able to purchase BlackRock's ETF on any platform. But that's just the institution that manages the ETF.
Okay.
So like Fidelity will probably push their Bitcoin ETF over BlackRock's on Fidelity's platform.
Yeah, they wouldn't even have touched BlackRock's.
I don't know how that works. I think you might still be able to purchase BlackRock's spot ETF on Fidelity.
That's crazy.
But the other thing is, it's the timing in which BlackRock is choosing to file for their spot Bitcoin ETF. Because the halving is like 300 days away. And it's like estimated takes like 240 something days to get your ETF approved. So if BlackRock ETF hits the market in 240 days and Bitcoin halving event is in 300 days.
So you're saying if BlackRock purchases it and it improves it and also the halving, that's like a double,
it's like a double catalyst where this could be a crazy bull run.
That'd be amazing.
And the other aspect of it is the liquid supply of Bitcoin. So do you know what that is?
No.
So that's the amount of Bitcoin available for purchase. So when people want to buy and sell Bitcoin, they put it on the exchange. But this is the first time ever entering into a bull market where the number of Bitcoin on the exchange is coming down at the same time we're entering a bull market.
So we're basically getting it for cheap during a bull market.
Well, what I'm saying is this demand for Bitcoin, this increase in demand for Bitcoin is happening at the same time that everybody's holding their Bitcoin and not giving it up.
Which means
if supply and demand balance and there's a massive influx and demand of Bitcoin and the supply is slowly dwindling.
So why did Bitcoin
in the bear market?
Why did Bitcoin go down from 30 to 25 though? If everyone's holding it and people are still buying it during a bull run.
I mean, there's like a bunch of different moving parts where I can't specifically identify why Bitcoin's price did this and that during like a short-term time frame. But big picture, we're talking about an increase in demand at the same time the amount of Bitcoin on exchanges is dwindling.
My bad. Coinbase actually got hit with that lawsuit during that time when it happened. Also, Binance.
Well, yeah, there's black swan events where, yeah, Binance and Coinbase get sued and everybody's like, oh, sell. Just sell the news. And, I mean, the way people are going to behave with news is honestly unpredictable, but
oh yeah, a little refill.
Good thing I got the big bottle, huh?
Hell yeah.
It's like a $5 bottle of wine.
Where'd you get it? Grocery outlet?
Yeah.
Hell yeah. It's good too, man.
And
It's
so
not
our
bad.
sponsor today is just kidding. No sponsors.
Oh, we was about to get copyrighted.
Sauvignon. Cabernet Sauvignon.
Interesting stuff.
So that's just the current events for today. But yeah, I told my dad that. He was like, this is the best. This is the biggest Bitcoin news you've probably ever told me.
Which was?
He was like, we need to buy some fucking Bitcoin. And I was like, Dad, what the fuck you think I've been telling you every day?
You're talking about Blackrock.
Yeah,
What, you told
I
him
was
about
telling him
BlackRock?
about BlackRock. Because, yeah, I showed you, like 1% of the portfolio. BlackRock's 1% of the portfolio, $177,000 per Bitcoin. That's just BlackRock. Not to mention the amount of FOMO that would create around Bitcoin.
What's FOMO?
Fear of missing out.
Fear of missing out.
But
Wow.
if Bitcoin's price goes $177,000,
Yeah.
everybody's like, hold the phone. What is Bitcoin doing right now? How do I buy Bitcoin? What is Bitcoin? Give me some Bitcoin. Everybody. It happens every cycle, and it's gonna happen again.
It's too volatile.
Those narratives do not matter during a hype cycle. When everybody's like, holy shit, Bitcoin. Nobody's saying, it's too volatile. It's a waste of energy. So yeah, that's pretty good stuff. We ready to get into some CBDC versus Bitcoin?
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm. So, let's see. Basically, central bank digital currencies are really only a thing because they see Bitcoin as a threat to their monopoly over the money printer. So they need to come up with a technology, a narrative where people say, you know what, we don't need Bitcoin because we have a digital dollar, a central bank digital currency. The CBDC, the central bank digital currency for the US dollar. Oh, it's faster transactions. Oh, they can just instantly send money into my account. Oh, I can just instantly send money anywhere at any time. Which, like, it is improvements to the current financial system on the surface. You see those things on the surface and you say, yeah, that's better. It's like I don't have to wait 3 business days to transfer money from bank to bank. Like that's obviously just an improvement to the current financial system. But that's what I fear that people are going to see and be like, "Oh yeah, it is better. We should use a central bank digital currency because it is better."
It's just like a centralized form of Bitcoin.
Right. So,
Which he has manipulated, right?
Even though on the surface things are better, you dig a little bit deeper and you start comparing these properties and capabilities and control. You start comparing these things to Bitcoin and you're like, wait a minute. It's like a CBDC is just another cryptocurrency. It's one of the 20,000 plus cryptocurrencies that have surfaced after Bitcoin. Like all those shit coins. So we could almost call it a CBS. Central bank shitcoin. But I'll get into why. So it's basically like giving a central authority complete control over all of your wealth that you have in the central bank digital currency. Because it is a central authority that approves and creates and makes all of the rules for that digital currency. So
Yeah.
imagine,
They haven't created this digital currency yet, have they?
no, but like 9 out of 10 central banks are exploring the implications of a central bank digital currency. So it's like everybody wants to build one because, yeah, sure, it is better. And they do need to compete. So it makes sense. But we need to educate people on what are the further implications of a central bank digital currency and why it will basically give up more control to a central party, and why Bitcoin is basically the polar opposite of that, and how it can help liberate people from this government control.
You say central banks are going to use it as a tool. What do you mean by that?
So now imagine everybody has their account with central bank digital currency, US dollar, central bank digital currency. Now, if you got pulled over and you got a speeding ticket, the US government could immediately seize the funds from your account. They have full control over what happens on the network. They run the network where the money goes back and forth. They see every transaction. They either approve it or deny it. Or they can seize funds. They can give people funds whenever they choose.
So they're kind of like the blockchain.
They control the blockchain, every aspect of it. It's not decentralized. It's a central authority controlling every aspect of the blockchain.
Okay.
So then that means, because before you said blockchain technology, no one has control over it, and if something was to change, everything after that has to change. But if the government has control over it, they can manipulate it and change whatever they want inside of it.
Well, it's like we're only going to compare a CBDC to Bitcoin because
Okay.
we'll just leave all of the other 20,000 plus cryptocurrencies in the dark because we care about Bitcoin. But, right, nobody controls Bitcoin. And you don't have to trust a third party for your transaction or my transaction to be sent to you. So for any reason, if the government thought that they didn't want any individual to send any money to anybody else, they could literally block it.
Because they can see it.
Because they can see
Because
it.
it's all public.
Well, I'm not sure how public they would make their blockchain because it's a central authority that controls it. They maybe won't make it public.
Adding on to like Leo's point, how can money be manipulated?
So that's what I'm saying is that they can literally control everything that happens to their central bank digital currency.
Now, give me an example of what they might be able to control.
So we could even, because like obviously politics are going to get involved. So if somebody who was currently in power didn't want to lose power or saw a threat somewhere in civilization, anybody they just saw him as a threat, good or bad, and who was to decide what's good or bad? Like, we can't leave it up to one single politician that has control, or maybe a small group of whatever political parties in power at that time. We can't give them free rein to suppress everybody else that doesn't align with their views. And that's how they would manipulate the central bank digital currency. They would use it against people that they wanted to suppress. Which is that's not freedom, that's not a democracy. That is just too much power for government. And we could argue that government money today is already giving too much power to government, making government too big. So if they had now control over all of the money, even more control over it, that's making government more powerful and giving them more centralized control.
So a CBDC is completely separate from the dollar.
Well, assuming so, okay, we're talking about the U.S. government creating their central bank digital currency. That would probably take place of the dollar. Like they would do some sort of slowly easing off the paper dollar and then making everything a digital form of CBDC.
That money that's in our bank accounts, they would consider that as a paper dollar?
No, well, they could probably just say, just like one for one, flip your bank account to CBDC money. Especially if, like we're seeing, all these banks collapse. And then JP Morgan, which is like the biggest bank, basically buys up all of these banks that are failing and then becomes an even bigger bank. So see how we're centralizing power? Now, if JP Morgan had close ties with the US government and implementing the CBDC, they could make it a lot easier where there's like, hey, JP Morgan, let's do this. And then he's like, yeah, sure. CBDC, JP Morgan now is CBDC. That's kind of like speculation theory possibilities, but dangerous. So you want to know how else they can manipulate money besides just controlling everybody's funds?
I want to know like the vulnerabilities that it poses.
So, okay. The vulnerabilities would be A, they can control what everybody does with their money. And if they think that you shouldn't spend your money, or they think that you owe money, or even if they want to give you money, they can do all those things instantly. But it's offering that control to a central party, which is too much control for a central party. But also, it creates a more immediate effect to the inflation that we currently have in our fiat monetary system. So it's like bringing all of the vulnerabilities of the old existing fiat monetary system and bringing them into blockchain, which is not the purpose of digital currency. It's not the purpose of blockchain technology. Blockchain technology and Bitcoin is a new system, completely independent of the old system. So a CBDC is literally bringing all of these vulnerabilities from the old fiat monetary system and implementing them into a central bank digital currency system where they can then control even further. So when we think about the never-ending inflation of the US dollar, like if they are capable of bringing the old system into the new and implementing it, then they're going to continue with the inflationary US dollar for as long as they can. And that's a problem because we've talked about this before, is how inflation really favors the elites. And it's the elites that teach it in Keynesian economics in schools. And it's the elites that are pushing for this implementation and that justify the inflationary monetary supply that we live in. So giving them the ability to continue that system is what would hurt people the most. Is what would hurt the middle and lower class the most, widening those social gaps between social classes, where they send everybody stimmy checks, but at the end of the day, all of that value trickles down to the assets, or those closest to the money printer get to spend the money first, and then people that get it last are left with the inflationary results of people already spending that new money. So that's the biggest problem. But then when you think about it, it's something I tweeted the other day and it's what you were talking about. It's the inability for people to fully grasp the significance of exponential movements. So like doubles. Like, did you know if you had like just an average piece of paper and you had the ability to fold it 50 times? Do you know how far that would stretch? Like, obviously you can't fold a real piece of paper 50 times.
Yeah.
But if you could, do you know what a double 50 times of just a piece of paper would look like?
Very small.
How small do you think it is?
Too small.
You have okay.
Probably like the tip
wait.
of my nail.
No. That's one sheet of paper. I'm saying folding it 50 times, so you're doubling the size of the piece of paper.
How high it would be?
50 times. Do you know how high that would reach?
Pretty high.
How high do you think though?
This high.
You think that high? 50 doubles?
No, probably this high.
That high?
Maybe a little higher.
This is exactly what I'm saying. 50 doubles stretches to the fucking sun. 50 doubles of a piece of paper reaches the fucking sun.
No, it does not.
Fact check me.
50 doubles.
Say
Okay.
you double a piece of
Hold
paper
on.
50 times. How high can it reach?
All right, so going back to when you were talking about inflation, there was like one part in your article where I was kind of confused on. And just need some clarification. I know you probably wrote it correctly. Maybe not. I
Yeah,
don't know.
I'm happy.
So you said right here, if there's no ability for a centralized authority to inject liquidity into the market, there's no need to raise interest rates to curb inflation.
Wait. Hold that question. What do we got, Leo?
It says if you fold a piece of paper and have 50 times, it would stretch from the Earth to between the Sun and Mercury. What? Let me see some pictures.
Nobody's done it.
Oh, whoa.
'Cause you can't
Yo,
do it.
look at these pictures. That's what it would look like.
Let me see.
What?
No way.
No.
After the show, send me that,
That
so
is
that I
insane.
can put it on the pod.
It is just...
That's crazy.
So
What?
that's what I'm saying when people have a hard time wrapping their head around exponential movements. Doubling 50 times, like you think it's like this, but
Yeah.
it goes to the fucking sun. You know what I mean?
To the moon.
Okay.
Some
Yes.
girl folded her paper 42 times.
So did you hear my question?
I want to hear your question again.
So you were talking about inflation earlier,
Mhm.
and I had one question from your article which kind of relates to inflation and the centralized authority. And here you say, if there's no ability for a centralized authority to inject liquidity into the market, there's no need to raise interest rates to curb inflation. What does
Right.
that mean?
So that's the whole Keynesian economic model that creates this boom and bust cycle in the economy. So Keynesian economics was really pushed by the government because it justified their ability to inject liquidity into the system, which basically gives them the power to create money at no cost with nothing backing it. But by them injecting liquidity, it then causes inflation of the dollar because there's more dollars. So spending increases, and when everybody spends and everybody has money, then the value of goods goes up. That's supply and demand. There's just increasing demand. So when that demand gets too hot, then
It makes it pointless for them to increase the interest rates because it already costs so much money.
no, it causes them to be, it forces them to raise interest rates because they can't let inflation just run away forever.
Okay.
So now they create this boom of liquidity that they inject into the economy, and then they create the bust when they raise interest rates and take liquidity and destroy demand, which is we're seeing that bust right now.
Okay.
Like interest rates shot up at the fastest pace in history, and we're at like 5.25%.
I thought we were at
And
4.75 at one point.
I think we're either at 5 or 5.25.
Okay.
But now they're raising it until the bust, until things continue to break, and too many things break, destroys demand, so that they can tame inflation. So what I'm saying is it's their ability to print money that created this boom and bust cycle in the first place. It's like it's government intervention that's creating this cycle that I would say has a lot of inefficiencies compared to a free market. That a free money that can't be manipulated by a central party. Does that answer your question, Joe?
Yeah. I feel like I understand that when the money. So from what I understood was once they put so much liquidity into the market, they put so much money they give people a lot of money, but with all this money, it causes the value of goods to go up. It causes them to increase interest rates so they can take back the liquidity plus something
Tame
more.
the inflation, yeah.
Plus something more. Yeah.
What do you mean? What do you mean by something more?
So they're putting money into the markets. It causes prices of goods to go up. But not only are they doing that, and people are paying paying high amounts, but because they got money, but they're also paying for the interest of the product, which is also causing the banks to get a little bit more back by putting liquidity into the market. You know what I mean?
No. I want to understand your question, though.
Okay. So I'm the government.
Okay.
I'm putting $1 billion into the market. Okay. And that causes the prices of vehicles to go up. Okay.
Call it $1 trillion.
Let's say $1 trillion. Okay. And that causes let's focus on one caveat, the cars.
Okay.
Causes the price of cars to go up because I put so much money. I gave people so much money, so people are using this money
Stimulated
to buy.
that demand.
Yeah, for cars.
Yeah.
But let's say cars in this instance. And then as the prices of cars are going up, the interest also goes up on the cars because there's so much liquidity into the market that people are trying to take liquidity, and the government, I'm trying to take back the liquidity, so I increase the interest rates.
Well, let me hold you there. Yes, but it's during the times of quantitative easing is what they call it, when they're printing money and adding money in circulation.
Mm-hmm.
Like this last time, interest rates were at 0. So it's not until the market gets too hot that they then raise interest rates. And you could also say that that's like old data that they're using to try and decide when they want to raise interest rates. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
So after they stimulate the economy with this new money, and then yes, demand gets too hot, prices get too high for cars.
Mm-hmm.
Now nobody's buying cars because the price is too high. And the Federal Reserve raises interest rates, taking liquidity out of the system. So now the prices are too high and nobody has money.
Yeah.
Destroys demand. And by destroying demand, you bring the prices of goods down.
Like the prices of cars will go back down.
Right.
Yeah, that answers my question.
Okay. Now, the other part that's also fucked up is they use a basket of goods to measure CPI, Consumer Price Index. So they're using like a basket of something like 50 goods, and they're measuring the price year over year to say, okay, inflation went up this much because the goods from last year now cost this much more. So inflation's 4.9%, right? But they changed the goods in the basket. They literally just fucking change it.
How do they do that?
Because they're the ones measuring the data.
Give me an example. Like what would be in their basket of goods that they change? Like what's something that's there and that's changed?
I couldn't give an exact example, but I know that if we used the basket of goods that let me look at it. Let me find it because it was a crazy number.
Let me see.
I remember learning this in macroeconomics. But now that you say it like this, that kind of sounds messed up.
Oh, it is. It's deliberately making people believe that inflation is not as bad as it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
This goes back to the whole point of the government just making up numbers.
Yeah.
And making up their inflation rates and everything.
Okay, here I found it. So if we use the same basket of goods that CPI was measured for inflation in 1980, if we use that same basket of goods until today, inflation hasn't been below 5% in 35 years. And their target inflation is 2%. So they continuously change the basket of goods to say a lower inflation number.
So could inflation actually be at like 10%?
Oh yeah, real inflation is much higher than what they actually say.
Okay.
So, if they use CPI inflation of the basket of goods in 1980s, it would be over 16% today.
Wow. So inflation has increased 16% since the 80s.
No, that's just year over year. Like this last year would have measured 16% alone. But what I'm saying is if we measured every year since 1980s, it wouldn't have been below 5% year over year in 35 years.
Oh, so it's only moved up 5% every year since the 80s, but now it's going up 16%.
5% every year for 35 years is a lot of inflation, and it is a lot more than the numbers tell us.
So it could be like 6, 7, maybe even 10%.
But last year over year, using 1980s basket of goods, CPI measures 16%.
Okay. The valuation is from the 80s. How it was moving from 5%, but now it's moving 16% compared to the 80s.
Well, what I'm saying is it just hasn't been below 5% in 35 years. That doesn't mean it didn't go above. But because of COVID, they printed a lot of money, and we're kind of seeing the after effects of it this year. Using 1980s basket of goods was 16%.
Was it better for us to not have stimmies?
It's debatable. It is because
it was cool at the time, but now we're looking back at it like, fuck, we just got...
Right. But, so we're in the system that we're currently in. And nobody would root for the system to collapse because then we're fighting in the streets for food.
Yeah.
Nobody wants that to happen. Everybody wants to be able to eat and survive. So, in that time, I wouldn't say that no stimmy check would have been the better route. Because people needed to eat. People needed to survive in a time where nobody could work. Whether that was a good idea or not was a different debate. But I wouldn't say that they shouldn't have gave people stimulus when they needed it. And in a new monetary policy, a monetary policy that's Bitcoin based, that can't be manipulated, that literally, well, that's actually not true because government can collect taxes in Bitcoin and they can still hand out stimmy checks in Bitcoin to people in need, but it's just based on the revenue that they got. It's not based on, hey, let's print it and give it out. It's money that was created, and it's money that existed, that people earned, that they collected in tax revenue, and then redistributed.
Instead of just printing more of it
And yeah,
and then distributing it.
and
distributing
then
it, and then
creating
coming-
and then
That makes
creating all
sense.
these after effects and problems that come with that new money.
And that's the benefit of Bitcoin.
That is
Yeah.
Bitcoin. That's a Bitcoin monetary system versus a CBDC monetary system.
And that's just one of the factors.
Okay, one thing I wanted to cover was when I was talking about how people can't fully wrap their heads around exponential movements. Well, we're talking about an exponential curve in the amount of dollars being printed. Like, we're going straight up for the new circulation of dollars. And Bitcoin's supply schedule is the exact opposite.
Jerome's got that money printer moving.
Oh no. Joe, you need to hold it
What
together.
is What's going on?
Joe,
This is good.
Joe, this is going to go on the Patreon subscription if you don't hold it together.
Okay.
Okay. So, when we're underestimating these exponential movements, the dollar is exponentially increasing in the amount of dollars that they need to print just to keep the system from collapsing. So, Bitcoin's supply release schedule is the opposite. Because you know how the Bitcoin halving event, when half the amount of Bitcoin every 4 years is released into circulation until we get to zero. So at the same time, dollars are doing this, and the number of dollars being added is increasing exponentially.
But the amount of supply of Bitcoin is going down.
It's not going down. It's still going up, but it's exponentially decreasing the amount of Bitcoin entering circulation.
So how does that look?
So they're opposite parabolic curves. So $1 exponentially increasing forever, and the other, Bitcoin, is exponentially decreasing forever.
Why do you start up though? Does it go back down?
Because it's halving. So we go 50 Bitcoin printed, or the block reward, 50 Bitcoin for mining a new block, then 25, 12, 6, 3,
That's why it curves that
1.5,
way.
0.75, and then
Until
until
21 million.
until all 21 million are released, but also the supply release is exponentially decreasing, cutting in half every 210,000 blocks every 4 years. So in these opposite parabolic curves, as because Bitcoin is maxed at 21 million and the dollar is literally infinite, or the central bank digital currency has an infinite amount of supply that can be added, and if it is in a digital form completely, it makes it even easier to add dollars to circulation, because they can do it like that. They can send it to your account like that for any reason, but it's a requirement of the system to continue to work, is that they increase the amount of dollars entering circulation.
That makes sense.
So if inflation is heating up of the dollar and inflation of Bitcoin is cooling down, getting harder, then as the price of Bitcoin, if you'd imagine, just stayed the same, it's not going to do that. But if we just imagine that the value of Bitcoin stayed the same, and then the value of each dollar exponentially decreased, it's going to take more dollars to buy the same Bitcoin in the future. Imagining that Bitcoin's value stay the same, which it's not going to. Bitcoin's value is going to exponentially increase because of its superior store of value.
But let's say like inflation increases, price of Bitcoin increases, but what if like let's say Bitcoin goes up to $50,000, even $100,000.
Okay.
But $100,000 in the future is still worth $27,000 today. Does that, you know what I mean? Does that do anything for us, at least, the Bitcoin holders?
So we've kind of had this conversation before. But what we're saying is the value of Bitcoin is 25,000. Wait, okay. We're starting at 25,000. And then we're saying because of the exponential increase in inflation of the dollar,
Yes.
the dollar value of Bitcoin, even though
Will kind of be the same because of inflation.
its value is still $25,000, but
It says $100,000.
because the inflationary dollar now gave the dollar value of Bitcoin at $100,000.
4x.
Well, how that could help people is if you chose to store your money in dollars, you lost 75% of your purchasing power. And if you held your money in Bitcoin, you at least maintained your purchasing power that you worked for.
That's a great way to think about that.
See what I'm saying?
That's a great.
That makes sense.
That's a great reason why to hold Bitcoin. Too.
Exactly.
It's a
So, and now when people work hard for money and inflation is exponentially increasing, they're like, okay, well, I need to do something with my money because everybody knows inflation's a thing. They just think they just think that's how it works. Like, we can't do anything about it. But it is a thing and people know it's a thing. So then they're like, okay, well, I can either spend my money for goods now because I can buy more goods with my purchasing power now than I will be in a year from now because of inflation. Or they think, okay, I need to invest my money in the stock market because if I don't, I'll lose 5% or 10% or 16% if we're using 1980s data. So now people that are uneducated about investing in the stock market, they just say, all right, well, let's just buy Netflix because I watch Netflix. Let's just buy
Black Mirror.
Let's just buy Starbucks stock, Nike stock. Like, they don't necessarily have any guidance in the stock market because, I mean, to know what you're doing in the stock market, like, that's a full-time job. Like, to be fully dialed in as a buyer, seller, trader.
Easy job though. I mean, not super easy,
It's not
but
that
you're
easy.
working from home. You're not lifting weights.
Well,
You're
okay,
not,
yeah,
like-
if you're good at it. But that's to say that even traders come out positive because sometimes they don't. So they literally work hard for their money, and then just to be able to maintain purchasing power, they have to risk the money that they worked so hard for. And that's because inflation. But if there wasn't inflation, you could work hard for your money. If we were in a monetary policy that couldn't be manipulated, that had a maximum supply of 21 million, you could work hard for your money and store your money in the same asset, Bitcoin, that you worked for. You don't have to then further speculate your hard-earned money just to keep up with the manipulation by the central government and how the monetary policy currently works. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So essentially, Bitcoin is a hedge against inflation.
Yes, but people have some pushback on that because if it's a bear market, then they're like, oh yeah, nice hedge against inflation. Because like it lost value against the dollar. But that's just because it's an immature asset, so it obviously is going to have some volatility.
Okay, let's talk about the monetary system, right? We were talking about the monetary system right there, and you kind of quoted Henry Ford. Okay,
I did quote him in the Substack. Yeah.
So it basically states from what you
just
quoted
read his
from-
quote then.
It says, "It is well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system, For if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning. What do you think he means?
Henry Ford saw exactly what was happening in the monetary system, saw exactly how people are being taken advantage of, saw exactly how the increase in money supply is being funneled to the elites first and then taking advantage of the people who are already struggling. And he was like, wow, it is a good thing that people don't know how this all works.
Because the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer.
Yeah, so he's saying if people knew how this worked, they would revolt before tomorrow morning. That was
tonight.
Yeah.
Let's go educate the world.
He was like, if everybody knew what was going on, everybody in the world tonight would go stomping on the Federal Reserve's door. Like, hey, what's going on here? Why are we being taken advantage of? Where's my money? Stop taking my money.
Let's do it. Let's start a Facebook group.
Dude, we don't need to do it.
That's why we're here on the
podcast.
podcast.
Because Satoshi Nakamoto already did it.
Yes.
And all we need to do is tell people, educate people on what it is, what Bitcoin is. Hey, guys, it's not just a fugazi for illicit transactions, okay? We got to wake up here. Bitcoin is real life, and it's a real life solution that some very honorable person or a group of people created for that exact reason.
Or a woman.
Could be a woman.
It's not a woman.
We don't know.
Come on, it's Satoshi Nakamoto.
That's true. It doesn't sound like a woman's name.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, see. All right.
The guy they found.
It's
Sorry.
plausible
Okay.
that it's plausible that a woman had something to do with it, okay?
It's possible, but look, there's a person's name, Satoshi Nakamoto.
Can you speak English?
It was not a woman.
I cannot understand you right now.
You're right.
But
Sorry.
it is possible.
It's a pseudonym, though. Remember?
a pseudonym.
Most
It's a
likely.
pseudonym.
Most likely a
Put
pseudonym.
pseudonym. No, I was kidding. Let's go. Let's keep going.
Shout out Satoshi Nakamoto.
Great man.
So,
Or a woman.
Oh yeah.
so now people could say, like, okay, yeah, sure. Okay, if Bitcoin is the solution, I can't buy it. I don't have $29,000 or $27,000, what it is today. But that is the one thing that you need to do is get off zero, and you don't need 27,000 because 3,500 satoshis, which is 1/100 millionth of a Bitcoin, is one satoshi. You can buy 3,500 satoshis for one single dollar.
3,448 actually.
Really?
Yeah, I have it. I had a question, but yeah.
Wait, so
Well,
30...
I mean, that's based on when I wrote it, which was a few months ago.
Okay, let's say
I just kind of rounded the numbers. 3,500 for a dollar. A round.
it's 3,448. Okay, but look, like let's say this dollar can get 3,448 satoshis. Do you think these satoshis will be worth, like, one satoshi could be worth more than $1 in the future?
That would mean that a Bitcoin is worth $100 million. One
Possible.
Bitcoin.
Possible.
And yes, I think that is in the future. When that day comes is extremely hard to predict without a crystal ball.
Also,
It's
another question.
It's like the pace of adoption and the pace of inflation and all of these other macroeconomic things that can happen. Who adopts Bitcoin? When they adopt Bitcoin, it's literally like anyone's best guess how it happens or when. But it will. Because nobody can change Bitcoin. It is money that cannot be manipulated. And when people realize that it's the best place to store their wealth, they will then choose the best place to store their wealth, because there's no reason to store your wealth in a riskier, more manipulated monetary system.
Okay, but let's tie it back. Let's go back to the CBDC because I have another question.
Okay.
You said if the government issues a fine for a speeding ticket, they could immediately deduct the amount from your account. if you do have a CBDC, right? But like, how is that possible? How is it possible that they know who you are, they have your account details, and they'll, even if they want to reverse a transaction, how can they do that? If they, is it like your account is tied to you as like an ID?
Yeah, it's like you have a bank account at Wells Fargo.
Yeah,
Like,
but it's like if I get a speeding ticket, they're not going to just go to
Right,
Wells Fargo.
right, but the IRS knows who you are.
No, they don't.
Like, if you didn't pay your taxes,
They're coming after you.
the IRS would literally take it from your Wells Fargo account. That's like today. But it'd be even easier for them to confiscate, seize, freeze anyone's funds for any reason.
Oh, you're broke? Oh, actually, you see like $100 here, I'm going to take, you know?
But that then you start to think like, okay, what are your motivations for freezing that specific person's funds? And would that all be public data where we could be like, hey, why are you freezing their funds? Because it's just too much control. And a central authority can do whatever party is in control can do whatever they choose, and most likely it'll be in their self-interest. Because that's honestly how, like, naturally human behavior is motivated by self-interest. So if you had a politician that didn't want to lose power or didn't want to be exposed by some person, they could just, boom, take all their money, freeze all their funds, suppress that person, put Donald Trump in jail. Like, oh, okay, we don't need to go there.
All right, but
We
Yeah,
don't
we're
need to
getting
go
into
there.
Politics over here.
We
So-
don't need to go
so
there.
you
I
said-
don't really want to.
you
But.
said they're acting in their own self-interest. Did you just say that?
Mhm.
So you said in essence they were acting in their own self-interest, attempting to stifle the paradigm shift occurring from the government-controlled money to decentralized and trustless money. So the CBDC is trying to shift us away from Bitcoin because, you know, they're trying to control the monetary policy. But I understand they're trying to shift us away from Bitcoin because, you know, it's in their obviously their own self-interest, like I stated. But like, is there any other reasons they're trying to shift us away from Bitcoin aside from just them trying to be in control of their money, and how important is that for them to be in control of the money, and how important is it for, like, could Bitcoin become the new monetary policy that no government is in control of, and what would happen in that type of society?
Mm-hmm.
That was a lot of questions.
Yeah. That's a,
Nah,
good,
answer
that's
the
a,
last one.
that's
Answer
a
the last
great
one.
question, Joe.
Answer that last one though.
The
Like,
last
let's say
one?
like
I'll
the
get to it,
government
yeah.
is out. Okay, just go.
Freedom.
So
Freedom.
that's really interesting, Joe. And I'm glad you have that question, because that tells me that you're understanding this.
Yeah.
So first of all, not only like do they have control over it, but they basically, like the U.S. government, Federal Reserve, they have the money printer for the world reserve currency. That means they can literally print money and buy goods from other countries with that money. And then other countries will then reinvest the money that we just spent for their goods. They will reinvest that money in U.S. treasuries. So then that money is just flowing back to America as we get imports of all the goods we want. So, as an American, it kind of contradicts self-interest of America. But on the other hand, it's like so many people are being taken advantage of that's like, okay, you're even taking advantage of all the people, all the countries around the world, which is, I mean, at the same time, it's a competition because, like, we don't want Russia to control all the resources and have, like, an evil dictatorship of the world.
Yeah.
So we are the best country to be able to do that. So in a world where we can't do that, which is kind of slowly what's happening in de-dollarization, where we're buying goods, imports from other countries, but then other countries are becoming less inclined to buy U.S. treasuries because they don't have as much faith in the U.S. dollar as they used to because of the manipulation that's happening, like the extent of the manipulation and the increasing inflation rates. Mm-hmm. Other countries are kind of like, whoa, okay, we need to protect ourselves here. We can't just buy U.S. treasuries that are going to be worth nothing. So now that creates this like a debt cycle where now that we're buying imports and the countries aren't reinvesting those dollars. Well, okay, first of all, countries don't want dollars in exchange for imports, or countries are beginning to not want dollars. But also countries are beginning to not want to reinvest in U.S. treasuries. So now who's going to purchase our debt? Because that's how we make that's how we create the money that we print, is it's debt. The money is debt. So if nobody's purchasing our debt, then we have to purchase our own debt.
By how?
Treasuries.
By printing the money to buy the old treasuries and then making this debt cycle even faster.
So funny. It's just so funny.
So it's so complicated, and it's really hard for even like me, who I just think about it and study it all day, every day, to even wrap my head around. But in essence, we don't want to lose the ability to print money that the whole world runs on. Depends on. Operates on. So it makes sense that elites running this country don't necessarily want to lose that ability. But in a world that operates on a Bitcoin standard rather than a US dollar fiat standard, but US dollar world reserve currency where the whole world runs on the US dollar, it creates a more equal society. Why?
Yeah, how so?
Well, because, I mean, we don't have the ability to just print money at no cost to us and then acquire goods. If you want goods and services, you have to work to acquire Bitcoin to purchase those goods and services. Like most countries around the world, if they want to import goods, they need to export the same amount of goods. Not the U.S. Because the U.S. can just print it and then import it.
Not work for it.
We don't need to work for it because we're taking advantage of everybody else, which, I mean, I'm an American, but even I think it's fucked up. Not to say that we should give power to Russia and China, which is like a whole nother conversation of like this game theory of how nations around the world adopt Bitcoin, and likely the first to adopt it will be big players in the global influence of the world. So, but I mean, the United States is like a global hub of innovation, and we have property rights, and it's a great place to live. So
it's fair.
So in the end, I think no matter what happens on like a game theory basis of how countries adopt Bitcoin, I think the U.S. government will end up being a winner because money will flow back to the United States in the form of entrepreneurship and how we and freedom and property rights.
I have a question. So Bank of America, JP Morgan, Chase, all these banks can have their own CBDCs, right?
Well, I don't know.
Or is there just going to be one CBDC?
Well, there would likely be a CBDC for different countries around the world. but the U.S. government being one of them. So I don't think if the U.S. government has a CBDC that J.P. Morgan would have a separate CBDC.
Okay, let's say the U.S. has their own CBDC. What will this new CBDC be called? What will be the name of it, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, they said June, like a long time ago when I was reading about it. It is June, but the Fed now.
Oh yeah, you're right. That's when the BRICS nation was coming out with all the. They were saying like they weren't going to use the dollar anymore, and then the government was like, "We're looking into the Fed now," and I was like, "What?"
What's
All
that?
of a sudden, that was going to be their essentially the CBDC that they're going to
Fed
create.
now.
The Federal
Fed
Reserve.
now, yeah, it's
Such a
basically
stupid name.
Which
Oh
is
my
crazy.
God.
And that kind of gave me hope. I was like, well, hope, but at the same time, like,
Fix
against
the name,
Bitcoin.
guys. Come on.
I was like,
it's so
huh,
bad.
if they really do adopt this program, that would, I don't know.
they called it like the CBDC light version, or it's not like the full implementation of a CBDC, but it's the same thing.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, I kind of root for CBDCs to come out because
so Bitcoin can shit on them.
because in that scenario, I don't know. Depends how people are going to perceive it and how many people are going to watch the Bitcoin Profits podcast.
So you're saying you're hoping that the CBDCs would happen because then people would see the similar properties that it would have
With the shit coins.
with the shit coins, and then they would look at Bitcoin and be like, it's better than CBDCs.
Yeah, because it's going to be, I don't know how obvious it is going to be to everybody,
Mm-hmm.
but at least to me, it's already obvious now.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can educate people and then they see a CBDC and they're like, oh my gosh, why would I ever store my wealth in a CBDC over Bitcoin? Just to make it more obvious to use Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the reason why I think a CBDC would be good for Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And I think they would probably coexist for a while,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like if you want to operate within society, like paying taxes, you have to use a CBDC. Like that's how you get your paychecks in a CBDC. But it's more significant of where you store and accumulate your wealth. You can't do it in a CBDC.
No, that makes sense. It makes sense.
My last question. FUD. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. My question to you, Teo, is why are people of power in such a FUD about Bitcoin's uprising?
Like they create the FUD is
Yeah.
what I'm saying.
Okay. Why? Why do you say that?
I say they create the fear, uncertainty, and doubt about Bitcoin. The Bitcoin's too volatile. The Bitcoin is only used for illicit transactions. It takes too much energy. Now it's this like you control the media, you control the people.
They have a lot about like they have a lot to say about what it lacks, but they just can't get that point across to why it's so valuable. You know?
Yeah.
I was gonna say because, yeah, like you say, like people don't see it because it's just. I mean, it's not that Bitcoin's not a thing, but if it was adopted, then they would see the potential benefits of it. But since no one's talking about it, using it, no one's gonna believe anything.
Like if people don't know what it is,
Yeah, exactly.
and Gary Gensler goes up there and says, "Hey, we don't need a digital currency because the dollar's already digital." Ha 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 ha. Then everybody's like, "Oh yeah, well shit, yeah, it's used for illicit transactions, too much energy. We just don't need it, guys."
Okay.
People just jump to that conclusion without ever trying to understand what Bitcoin is. And these people of power are taking advantage of that and creating narratives and pushing them to the media because they control the media, except for Twitter. But if they can control the media and they can control what people see and read, and they can control people in governments who create these narratives, and people follow those politicians or people of power, they trust their opinions, then they're effectively suppressing Bitcoin so that they can maintain their control over monetary policy, because they clearly identify it as a threat to being able to control that monetary policy.
That's what I meant to say.
Mm-hmm.
You explained it pretty well.
Nice.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. It's my job.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's my job here at Bitcoin Profits.
It's like people don't believe it until they see it, you know, like that. So obviously they're gonna look out at all the bad things that they don't know about.
Yeah. So my last point is just the fact that everybody in the world has a choice, because anybody with a smartphone can participate in Bitcoin's network. They can buy Bitcoin. They can opt out of their CBDC or fiat monetary policy and adopt a new system that's not manipulated.
Our privacy kind of just goes out the window if we adopt CBDCs.
Sure does.
Yeah.
Because the government can see every last transaction that you make. So we just need to educate people. We just need to get people to watch the Bitcoin Profits podcast. I mean, second episode, we're growing. But this is stuff that people need to know, and that's why we're doing it.
That's exactly right.
You guys have any further questions?
Not really, no.
Not at the moment.
We're good?
No.
Okay, guys. This is the Bitcoin Profits podcast. We're signing off, baby.